Well, you're welcome back. And let's get to listen to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Vice President of the Republic, doing what he does in his comfortable best, talking about the economy, but he's raised expectations and has received various replies, including that some of the figures that he gave out were inaccurate or were selective in a manner to achieve propaganda ends rather than do justice to matters of the economy. So let's listen to Dr. Bawumia. We'll get to listen to some other individuals who have spoken about the matters of the economy. Dr. Joseph Obeng, we'll hear Isaac Adongo, we'll hear Ato Forsing. Of course, Fifi Kwete spoke at that forum by the Coalition for Restoration, but because he's here, we'll hear him live. So let's listen to this gentleman on the economy and return to the studio.
The positive trade balance has resulted in a significant narrowing of the current account deficit as a percentage of GDP. Improvements in the current account performance and increased capital inflows have helped to boost the international reserves over the last 24 months. Gross international reserves reached $7.56 billion at the end of December 2017. Despite these improvements, the net foreign exchange reserve declined in 2018, first as forex sales by the Bank of Ghana, first is the forex sales by the Bank of Ghana in its normal exchange rate management, and second is the portfolio outflows as foreign investors repatriated coupons, thus their investments here and principal investments over concerns about Ghana's exit from the IMF program. There were jitters in the market because Ghana was leaving the IMF program. Following the recent Eurobond issue, Ghana's gross international reserves as the end of March 2019 stands at $9.9 billion, equivalent to 5 months of import cover. The start of 2019 has been characterized by another sudden sharp depreciation of the cedi, which was largely been reversed. Within a week, the cedi went up close to 5.9 to the dollar, and then it retreated back to about 5.07, and even was threatening to go below 5. But this is really an unprecedented development, that you don't normally see such a retreat when the exchange rate depreciates. And this was also, and you see within, in the next graph, when we look at the cedi-dollar exchange rate, that you will see that in this period when there was a reversal in the cedi depreciation, the Bank of Ghana had not intervened in the market. In fact, if you look at it as at the end of March 2019, the cedi has depreciated by about 5.18% so far this year. The most important and the proximate cause of the recent depreciation is the time inconsistency of an IMF prior action on the reserves target. The data on the annual rate of depreciation of the cedi in recent years shows that the worst performance so far under the MPP government, the 8.4% depreciation that we saw in 2018, that worst performance is better than the best performance under the previous government between 2012 and 2016. So our worst is better than your best. And then you say boot for boot. This one is more like boot for chalewote. You will recall that I stated in 2014 that if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. That was true then. That was true then, and it is true now. It is 100% correct. So if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. But it is warped logic to jump from that to a conclusion that if there is depreciation in your currency, then the fundamentals must be weak. Do you understand the logic? It is very warped logic. If the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. But if the exchange rate moves, you cannot jump to that conclusion that the fundamentals are weak. That defies logic. That defies logic. There could be other external factors causing the exchange rate depreciation. The exchange rate depreciated by 31.3%. The fiscal deficit was 10.1% of GDP. The public debt rose to 70.2% of GDP. Inflation rose to 17%. And GDP growth had declined from 7.3% to 4%. In other words, the economic fundamentals had weakened significantly, and therefore the depreciation was easily explainable. It was not caused by dwarfs or high-rise buildings, as we were told. The exchange rate in 2014 had exposed the weak economic fundamentals. To reduce the incidence of smuggling and enhance revenue, the benchmark delivery values of imports will be reduced by 50%. This, however, for vehicles, the reduction will be 30%. This is because vehicles already attract an amount of depreciation, which if you factor it in, it will take you closer to the 50%. This will be effective from tomorrow. It looks like there's a lot of support for this policy. We are doing this because we expect that you will see higher volumes coming into Ghana and we will make higher revenue. Also, ladies and gentlemen, the physical examination of containers in the port is to reduce, the benchmark we've given customs is to reduce the physical examination of containers at the port from 90% currently to 10% by June.
His Excellency, the Vice President, made a number of profound statements that were not supported by facts. And so even as the people of Ghana were contemplating whether it was the economy that we knew or that we have suddenly been transported to heaven, the international community began to give a verdict. And I'm sad to report and to give a word of caution to His Excellency, the Vice President, not to once again plunge this country into international disgrace. Yesterday, Bloomberg reported that hours after the Vice President made some of the claims that actually frightened them, the cedi reverted back to its unenviable record of being the worst performing currency in Africa. Your Excellency, Bloomberg reports that yesterday the cedi was trading at 5.61 at a time that the Vice President was in Ghana celebrating this abysmal performance and a disgrace to the international community, to us from the international community, because then we have once again gone back to be the worst performing currency in Africa.
Right. So you heard Dr. Bawumia just some highlights of the almost 100-page presentation that he had to do. It's been reduced to about 77 pages for what I have before me that I have been reading all night. Right. So let's begin on this note, and I'd like to start with you, Kuku. Let's begin on this note. Professor Jampo has made a statement, and his observation is that it cannot be correct that you listen to Dr. Bawumia and he doesn't seem to have observed anything good that was done in the previous administration. You listen to the NDC finance team and you don't hear them also make a single reference of anything good that has happened over the period of this administration. And he believes that that is just our problem. So let's take it from that perspective first to start with.
Well,
what's wrong with us?
What a question. See, it is the extreme partisanship of our politics that disables political actors across the divide from acknowledging some successes chalked by their opponents. And here I'm talking about a principle, a general perspective that I'm bringing on board. Otherwise, indeed, government is a continuum. And if you did a careful analysis of our history, particularly economic history, you'd see that there are certain policies as well as projects that have actually had a period, in terms of their duration, began from somewhere and continued by a successive government. Indeed, under the Fourth Republican Constitution, there is a certain obligation to continue with projects that had begun before you came in. Previously, due to the coup culture, there was this tendency to come and abandon all projects and begin your own, and indeed create the impression that those projects that preceded you were actually either procured through corruption or were prestigious or whatever names you gave to it.
It's actually a constitutional obligation, except that they don't follow it.
Oh, if you did a careful analysis of the Fourth Republican experience, you'll be surprised that there will be some notable exceptions, notable programs that had been abandoned, but generally have been continued. What we have been doing is people wanting credit to be given to them exclusively. So it's become a game of a sort, and it's led to a certain distortion. But I've taken my time carefully looking at the past when projects were abandoned anyhow and characterized as high profile, prestigious and corruption-laden projects. Under the Fourth Republic, we've had instances, significant instances of some abandonment. Let me be honest with you, but generally, it's continued. If you go to Kufuor's first term, look, there was an announcement by the government, but through the Ministry of Works and Housing, that no new projects were going to be embarked on, except they will complete the old ones. This was made by Kwame Batels, and indeed they focused on that. But again, then you have the other side saying that, look, you've been here a year or two, what are you doing on your own? All the projects you are commissioning or inaugurating are our babies. And then it becomes, it's petty in a way. Let me be honest with you, because if you are looking at a nation building, we should be focusing on the substance, on the real things, and not who takes credit for what,
so
when, and how.
Preliminary general comment is to ask the question, can either be correct that none is seeing anything right with the other?
I'm not too sure whether that has come out in a very manifest way, because you see, certain things that this government, this administration, Akufo-Addo administration, has been doing predates its advent to office. The problem has been that why don't you credit us? But I think that is petty. In my candid opinion, the reality is there clearly. If a project is being constructed, look, when was, for instance, this was loan-driven projects. When was the loan sent to Parliament? When was it approved? When did the construction begin? These things are hard facts, verifiable. Nobody can take away from you.
All right.
Okay, so to be honest with you, I think gradually we'll overcome that. I am an ultimate optimist. I see it as, if you make an absolute out of that, we all look petty.
Okay.
But otherwise, government is continuing.
All right.
No?
Okay, so that's just a brief preliminary remarks, and then we will get into the meat subsequently. Now, so the NDC didn't seem to see anything good with the presentation by Dr. Bawumia. In the same way, the NPP can't seem to see anything good with the presentation. Is that?
No, but please.
Let me just make a quick thing on the back of Kweku's thing.
Yeah, but because the question you are asking now is slightly different from what you put to me.
It is. It's slightly different. You're right.
I thought we checked only facts. No, I mean, I think Kweku talk about projects, but I think in the long-term development of the country, policies are important.
Sure.
And in that sense, really, we have had policy continuity from the PNDC, from when they adopted liberalization in the early 80s to now. We have had a policy continuity. So in a certain sense, the Fourth Republic has been the consolidation in policy terms of what the PNDC started. And I think that is important, so that in that not discussing policy continuity, the impression is created about fundamental differences. But actually, if you look at it in terms of policies, we've had basically policy continuity with some variation and so on, but fundamentally, the policy continuity of this has been, over the past 30 years.
Okay.
I agree.
If we focus on projects, we miss the bigger picture.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
But your thing about not seeing anything good in each other, really, I mean, these were two-party political broadcasts. I mean, these were not stock-taking and representation to the country. So these were two-party political broadcasts. And party political broadcasts tend to be selective in their facts. They tend to be polemical. They tend to be self-glorifying. So, I mean, if, say, the vice president was coming to talk about, say, in my view, an account to the nation.
That's what they project, that this is supposed to be
but
the
I'm saying that
meeting with the public.
I'm saying that, but it was a party political.
They don't exactly see it as that.
Well, I'm saying that if you
even though
listen
the chorus may give that
yeah,
out.
well, I mean, even some of the, but so in that characterization, then we can, in my view, understand why on both sides, there's a selectivity of facts, and because really, there are many things that neither side talked about, okay, which concern ordinary people, those who talk about things in the pockets and lives of people. They didn't list those things, but you could talk about the persistence of a housing crisis.
Okay.
The fact that a good idea in free SHS has become pretty chaotic, in these implementations with long-term consequences for the quality of education young people are getting. You can pick any number, the National Health Service and its problems. So if we're having a discussion about, really a balance sheet, you should be able to say, this is what I've achieved, these are the challenges that we face, and these are some of the lessons that we've learned. Of course, but if you are making a party political broadcast, you don't do that. The same with the NDC.
Right.
When the NDC came to make comments on the presentation, I mean, the Mahama era was a period of glory.
Right.
And yet, this was a president who lost an election very badly because the electorate's verdict was that he had failed. In a party political broadcast, of course, that's not likely to come up.
Okay. So, Bokping and Fifi, this is how I'll continue with you. And then Kweku and Yao would also have a similar, input. So for all of you, and starting with you, what are the highlights of Dr. Bawumia's presentation as regards the health of the economy? What are the highlights? What is it that you take away? What are the takeaways? And I'm not talking about the policy announcements in his diagnosis of the economy, what should we pay attention to?
Okay, thank you very much, and I apologize for coming a bit late. So I think that Dr. Bawumia's presentation was necessitated by the sharp depreciation of the cedi. A couple of months ago, the president gave us the State of the Nation address that also touched a bit on the economy broadly. So the question is, from the time the president gave the State of the Nation address, very, very comprehensive, to the time that the economic management team gave their presentation, what has changed in terms of data build-up? So you could see that the presentation was in response to the fact that the cedi had depreciated. The vice president more or less had been imprisoned by the depreciation. We hadn't heard from him. I hope that is okay. And then, so the issue was, okay, we need to be able to make a case that we haven't lost it. You remember, this same party, when they were in opposition, gave us a lot of hope. And I still respect the MPP for the way they engaged Ghanaians when they were in opposition. I am afraid to say I have not seen that from the NDC. They diagnosed the economy. They gave us independent presentations. They chose their own forum. They were not responding. They were not reacting, unlike what the NDC did. That the economic management team said they were going to do this, then immediately they also put something together. No, it will be important for the NDC to have its own course of how they are engaging Ghanaians. Through that, they may also want to react to some of the things. So it was down to the depreciation. Now, then, whilst they were silent, the space was filled by all kinds of reasons. Then people started quoting his own words back to him. It's time to eat your own words. So you said, once the cedi depreciates, it's because the fundamentals are weak.
So the NDC was not exactly silent, except that they did not take like a concerted program to make a presentation like Dr. Bawumia used to do.
Precisely.
But as you suggest, it does appear this was a result of the pressure, including particularly from the NDC.
Yes.
Okay.
And a good number of Ghanaians who, you know, when the cedi depreciates, it doesn't matter which party you belong to. It doesn't discriminate.
Okay.
Okay, so, but largely...
So the major highlights.
Largely, I agree largely with many of the things that the economic management team put forward. We have said even before their presentation that there is no way you could objectively take on the government by looking at the fundamentals of the economy. That assuming you want to do a regime comparison from the time they took over, that is end 2016, and then let's say end 2018, running to the first quarter of 2019, you could not objectively conclude that the fundamentals of the economy have weakened necessarily. That is not supported by the facts on the ground. There might be other reasons, and I'm sure other stakeholders, analysts have talked about even how our debt management strategy, which we started from 2015, in terms of our borrowing strategy and all of that, is also playing a part in that depreciation. So I will look at it from that context. But at the end of the day, they also gave us a lot to think about, a lot in terms of what they are doing, a lot in terms of also policy issues that they have articulated. They have also told us how the outlook is like going forward. But of course, data can always be manipulated. The choice of data, the timing, the basis of comparison, most social scientists are guilty of that. So it's just like trying to describe a half bottle and saying it's half empty or it's half full. Sometimes your political ideology orientation even influence the value judgment you bring to bear on the data and all of that. But I think as a country, we should be able to go beyond that.
Okay, so if he says they have done better on almost every key indicator of the economy, do you agree that they have done better when they refer to the public debt, stock, which, from 122 billion in 2016, they have brought now to 173 billion. Is that a better management and something to celebrate as they sought to do?
Okay, thank you very much. There is no government that can manage this economy without borrowing. It's impossible. It's impossible to the extent that our revenue envelope remains dwarfed, which has been our problem right from independence. When you look at the budget, 2017 budget, which Parliament approved, including the minority, has a budget deficit. That budget deficit is an indication of the borrowing requirement of the government. Once you run a budget deficit, automatically you are going to borrow. You either borrow from the external market or from the domestic market. When you look at the 2018 budget, there was a deficit. It has to be financed. You look at 2019 budget, that was approved, there was a deficit. It has to be financed. But when you look at the debt in nominal terms, certainly it has gone up. But a good way to judge that is that you take money to invest, so you're also looking at the growth of your economy. So when you look at the debt in relative terms, then you are able to tell whether it's going up at a rate higher than the previous government. So when you take the banking sector cleanup in terms of the cost, because we have to absorb that with the public balance sheet.
Right.
When you take that cost of bailout out and you look at the rate of debt accumulation.
12 billion.
Yeah.
3.2%
of
of the
GDP.
GDP.
Yeah, so when you take that out and you look at the rate of debt accumulation under this government, it's actually going down from what it was in 2013, from what it was 2014, from what it was then 2015, 2016, it dipped a bit. You know why? Because the IMF had come in and they were moderating the way we were doing things. So in terms of the rate of debt accumulation, it started declining from 2015 to 2016.
But then the critics say that this was avoidable. You bring the debt upon yourself and you pushed 12 billion into the banking sector. So why should anybody be sympathizing with you?
But the point is that you can't say it was essentially their creation. The cost of not reacting in this way could be much more detrimental to all of us. So when you are looking at all these things, you want to be able to put the politics aside and look at the common good. Even with that, we are not done yet. The lower end of the market in terms of savings and loans and microfinance, Bank of Ghana had done the analysis. They were waiting for the financial bit to be on the table, then they could move in.
Okay. Now let's do it this way. We'll take each sector somewhat as time allows us. But can you spend some 2 minutes to tell me the major highlight you took also from the NDC's finance team?
Okay, so through their presentation, it made that to take another look of some of the things that Bawumia told us, because he has sought to identify certain potholes in all of that. And for me, it was very good, largely. So in terms of addition, I didn't see quite much. I was also thinking that in terms of looking at the past, we could all be very good at it, but in terms of the solutions, the alternative solutions, but of course, we can understand that. Because one thing that I picked from that presentation largely was the idea that they talked about the fact that the central bank was in the market. Because when you look at the international reserves, it had actually gone down. So I had to make a few calls and gather a little bit more data. And through that, I also learned additional things and all of that. Apart from that, I believe that it's good because they also have quite a cloud. They have a constituency to satisfy. Okay,
but you've not mentioned any specifics from theirs. If you don't mind, I could just refer to one thing that Isaac Adomo referred to. He spoke about the borrowing, what you spoke about a while ago. He spoke about the borrowing and referred to how bad it is that we are borrowing and we are not doing anything with the borrowing so that it will benefit the future and assist in the growth of the economy. And so in a summary, He says we are borrowing for kinky and fish instead of building infrastructure and building blocks for growth. Fact?
That I disagree with that to a very large extent. The reason is that when we go for a loan, it's not everything that goes into infrastructure financing. There are a portion that we use for liability management. In fact, when you look at Bank of Ghana's calendar of borrowing, you can't take the entire amount as fresh debt.
He doesn't discount that. What he's saying is that you can't point to any single, major thing that the borrowing is being used for, apart from, as it were, taking care of liability and paying the salaries and things.
That is a logical outcome of our actions and inactions over the years. Let me just, I don't want to do politics with this. Pick Ghana as a country. Every cedi tax revenue that we generate, about 48 pesos goes to debt servicing. These are debts that have been accumulated since Ghana was founded. I won't say it's an NDC debt, I won't say it's an NPP debt, it's Ghana's debt. Successive governments, like Sokoku Baku talked about, the government is a continuum. So they come to add, we retire some, and all of that. So look at the 2019 budget that was approved. 18.6 billion cedis was set aside just for debt servicing. We are not talking about principal repayment, just the interest component on our debt. Then 23 billion cedis goes to wages and salaries, compensation for employees. Do you know how much we are saying we are going to generate by way of tax revenue in 2019? 45 billion cedis. Add 18.6 billion, less approximately 19 billion. Add that to 23 billion. That is taking more than 90% of the tax revenue that we are going to generate. Okay. So the question is, so when you take these two line items out, and this is not peculiar to the NPP. Look, we saw that level of rigidity running through from 2012 when we operationalized the single spine and all of that. This is the reality. And as we speak, consistently, for the past 5 years or so, our budget deficit has averaged 7.6%. That tells you we are going to borrow. But when you even pick the Eurobond, which has also swelled up our debt stock, we took 3 billion, right? Out of the 3 billion, we are told that $1 billion is for liability management. $2 billion is going into what? Infrastructure. We all do agree that when it comes to infrastructure, this government hasn't done a lot, largely also because our focus has been to balance the books, meet the IMF conditionalities.
Did you mean to say it hasn't done a lot or it hasn't done anything yet?
Well, they haven't done a lot because when you look at the annual budget funding, okay, there's some allocation for that. When you look at the 2017 budget, there was an allocation for capital spending. You look at 2018, there was an allocation for capital spending. So you couldn't look at all of this and say that nothing has been done at all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, let me begin. You can begin from the highlight of your presentation as a finance team, for which we should be paying attention to you a lot more. Take us through those aspects of, selective, being propagandist and selective in the figures for purposes of painting the economy within a certain regime in a certain light, so that they could, as it were, project that they were doing far better. You remember the refrain, the chorus, we are doing better. They mentioned we are doing far better, far better. So let's hear from you.
All right. Thank you very much, Samson, and good morning to all your very many viewers and listeners. It's been a while on Newsfile. And let me use the opportunity to salute the great people of Ketu South. Happy to represent you and my friends across the country. Samson, let me maybe have a little take on the first aspect that was discussed by both Yao Graham and Kweku Baku, relating to whether really the two parties are making enough effort to be able to, as it were, accommodate each other. And that issue came up actually during our forum, and I happened to be the one who spoke to it when the question was asked, so I could maybe speak to it a little bit. What I would say is that as a country, we chose a path of what I consider to be, we call it multi-party democracy. Effectively, it has become really a bipartisan democracy because really it's about two parties at the moment. And because of the very fierce nature of the competition, the adversarial nature of it has really become much more dominant. It happens to be the same in the US, it happens to be the same in UK. That's the nature of it, very adversarial. Everyone tries to literally show that I am the better. I think in the process of the core issues sometimes get a bit into the background. I, as a person, and I believe I speak so on behalf of my party as well, I look forward to the time when the adversarial nature of it you cannot completely take away. But it will become such that the real thing that has to do with the transformation of the conditions of our people will be much more in the forefront. Where we start boasting more about the real things that actually are changing, as opposed to simply putting numbers to say that we are better. Because numbers really can show that one is better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the conditions have really transformed. It's almost like a student, two students who are both below the pass mark. But simply because maybe one gets 30 over 100, the other gets 25 over 100, there's a real boast as to I'm better than you, but really both of you have failed. I really look forward to that situation. I would say also that we can actually reach that situation faster. Both sides are guilty, but that need to be explained that the guiltier party as always is our friend on the other side. And I'll explain to you why.
Predictable.
Yeah, I'll explain to you why. 8 years in office, I'm talking about 2009 to 2008. It's true that because of the nature of politics, we always would say, you know what, we've done better than you. But I don't recall us coming into office in 2009 and saying that the 8 years of the Kufuor regime was nothing but failure. We admitted, for example, that for the 8 years that President Kufuor was in office, they sustained the positive growth of the economy. They did. They also, to understand, had situations where the cedi for a large period remained stable. Those were admissions we made. Growth was sustained, cedi was stabilized. Those are definite things. I mean, we of course said that in terms of infrastructure, they could have done far better because we did much, much better during the Ronnie's 8 years than they did. So that banter well. But the situation where our friends came into office to 2017, and the obsession has been to say that every single thing that was done prior was nothing but a mess, total mismanagement, lack of economic capacity, that poisons the atmosphere. It brings about a toxic atmosphere that automatically makes your opponent also to react bad. And we are capable of reacting. So I'm saying that if I would have actually wished that President Akufo-Addo, I would say that really in terms of age consideration, by far I think in the Fourth Republic, he's actually came into office at a much older age than many. President Rawlings was I think 46 or so, 45 when he took over. President Mills relatively younger. President Kufuor was also younger. President Akufo-Addo, having had the greater level of maturity, I would have thought this was a fine opportunity to put that great adversarial thing a little bit in the background and chart a path that really can say, you know what, both of us can do better. Maybe we've done better than you, but not the extreme thing that we've seen. But that's just a very preliminary. Now let me address a few of the issues relating to our forum, and in the process, of course, rebutting some of the things that were said 2 days earlier. Our forum really dealt on two main things. One had to do with what we consider to be the lack of credibility of some of the things that were said and some of the numbers that were put out. And you must appreciate that in this business, it's not just what we are saying. Joy FM, I mean multimedia in particular, you are reputed for great fact checking, and I'm sure you've done a bit of that, and I'm sure you can subsequently do it. So there's media verification, so which you can do. And then, of course, the next thing we did after establishing that there was lack of credibility to a lot of the things that were said, the fact that we put out, we also established that it cannot be the case that our friends in government today are better managers of the economy than we've been. So those are two considerations. So in the process of trying to establish they're not better managers, we therefore had to bring out what it is we see now, which really shows that they really are not doing better than we did. Now let me start with the first one, which has to do with the lack of credibility of the fact. I think Professor, please the name again, Bopin?
Yes, Bopin.
Yeah, Bopin. You actually said that the central thing that made the EMT to come out had to do with the fact that something is happening to the currency, the depreciation of the currency. Because clearly that must have been the difference between the State of the Nation address barely, a month and a half ago and now. And that's true. So let's go to that central statement that was made by Vice President Bawumia, trying very hard to say that, you know what, there is no inconsistency vis-a-vis the position I espoused earlier and what it is I'm espousing now, especially relating to that statement about if you money the economy with propaganda, the foreign exchange depreciation will expose you. I want to establish that Vice President Bawumia deliberately misled the country. Deliberately misled the country when he said that statement he made was made in 2014. It was a deliberate misleading of Ghana. I must understand that I must put out that there is a possibility when we make a mistake that we actually have made a genuine error. That's it. There are times that as a human being you can make a genuine error. A genuine error can be forgiven because we can't always get every fact right. We can make mistakes. But I want to say in this particular case, it was not an error. When the Vice President said that I made this statement in 2014, it was not an error. It was a deliberate misleading of the country. Let me explain to you why. And by the way, let me explain who exactly the year that statement was made. That statement actually was made at the Ferdinand Ayim lectures, memorial lectures, and delivered on the 2nd of May, 2012, and not in 2014. And there's no way the Vice President can say that he did not remember. Let me tell you why I would say so.
It was popularized in 2014.
No, no,
at least.
No. It wasn't popularized in 2014. It was delivered in 2012, and throughout that campaign, that was a refrain, because I remember very well because I was then Deputy Minister for Finance, and throughout that campaign, we combated that robustly and explained that he was being disingenuous because he was actually running away from the fact that the fundamentals were true. Because what the Vice President sought to do in 2012 was to say that, you know what, over the period 2009, 2011, and into the beginning of 2012, the NDC had chalked some remarkable fundamentals. And some of those fundamentals, MPP in office today has not gone anywhere close to them. I'm laying the foundation to understand why I'm saying he deliberately misled the country. What were the fundamentals? NDC had met depreciation of the currency at the close of 2008 at 20.2. The cedi depreciated by 20.2%. And even so, it stopped at 20.2 only because NPP resorted to the sale of Ghana Telecom in 2008 at the last moment to try to see whether they can raise some money to hold the city. So depreciation could have actually been far worse, 20.2. Now, as a result of the difficulties, the first 5 months of 2009 saw further depreciation up to 18% because of the real difficulties that we met, which was left behind by the NPP. We brought that situation. By the close of 2010, the cedi depreciated by 3%, which actually is the lowest in the recent history of Ghana. From the time of, the 8 years in office of President Rollins, the 8 years in office of President Kufuor, and even now, 3% for the year. 2011, the whole year, the cedi depreciated by 4.9%. That's about the cedi. In terms of inflation, we met inflation at the close of 2008 at 18%. Because of the problems left behind, the inflation quickly jumped to 21%. And by May 2009, inflation was about 18%. Within 12 short months, we brought inflation down from 21% into single digits. 12 months, 12 short months, and kept it there back to back for 33 months. Unprecedented in the history of Ghana. Growth of economic growth. Economic growth by 2011 was 14.4%, the highest in our history, unprecedented. And while some even sought to say that it is really largely oil-driven, the fact is that no, it was comprehensive, because the non-oil aspect of it was 8%, comprehensive growth of the economy. It was not just oil, it was the total economy that saw growth. Great. Treasury bill rate, we met it at 26% when we came into office. By the time we reached November of 2011, it had come down also into single digits, 9.2%. In fact, since then, we have never again had treasury bill close to that level. So you can see those are the background that we're talking about. Cocoa production had hit 1 million metric tons also by 2011. So when Dr. Bawumia mounted that podium on 2nd May 2012, his aim was to say that, you know what, all these fundamentals you'll be hearing are just cosmetic. In fact, he actually went beyond that. He sought literally to call into question the very professionalism and integrity of 2 major institutions in the country, Ghana Statistical Service and the Bank of Ghana, where he himself had served. So you understand the background. The background is that he spoke these words at the time when the fundamentals were actually more remarkable than the fundamentals he's boasting about today. And let me also state that these fundamentals were being achieved under the head, the John Dramani Mahama, who was then the chairman of the economic management team. Today, it's very convenient for them to try to create the impression as though President Mahama, then vice president, was not in charge of the economy and therefore should not take credit for those remarkable statistics.
So that in your reference to the cedi depreciation, for example, do you discount or do you sort of disagree with what Dr. Bawumia says on page 36? No,
because I've not really come into the issue.
Paragraph 36, I'm coming. Paragraph 36, okay. That will be on page 31 of his statement, where he said, so how has the cedi performed recently? At the end of December 2017, the cedi cumulatively depreciated by 4.9%, 9.6% in 2016 against the US dollar. The cedi's best performance since 2011. Then he proceeds to say the cedi depreciated by 8.4% in 2018, largely on account of emerging market pressures and US interest rate increases. The data on annual rate of depreciation of the cedi in recent years shows that the worst performance from 2017 to 2018 is better than the best performance between 2012 and 2016. Is that accurate?
There again, you see exactly what you call the, should I call it? It's not just selectivity. Because you see, selectivity is okay, you can understand it. But this is just what's called pure mischief. Pure mischief. Why? President Mahama, then the head of the economic management team, was in charge of the economy in 2009. When we brought the depreciation of the currency, which for the first 18 months was 18%, we actually, at the end of the year, we were able to bring it down from 18 down to 15% under his watch, the head of the economic management.
That's 2009.
Yes, yeah, that's the first year. The following year, under the head of the economy, he again, as the head of the economic management team, kept the cedi depreciating by only 3%. A fit that NPP in the previous 8 years and these current 2 years have not been able to.
So that's 2010.
Good. 2011, the cedi depreciated by 4.9%. 4.9%. He selectively chose not to make reference to any of them.
Okay, so
and
he's
now
accurate.
start looking. Yeah, but see, you can be accurate, but not just selective, but mischievous. You see, intellectual honesty requires that if you want to make a case, you are comprehensive and allow the judgment to be made by the people. Don't try to literally cut it so that the people will think this is only what it is. When you do that, you are not being an intellectually honest person. And it's important for the office of the vice president that some amount of credibility and some amount of greater honesty is required. But let me because I actually started building the point and you took me off a bit. So I'm saying that Vice President Bawumia deliberately did not mention 2012, because if he had mentioned 2012, the country would have known that, by the time you were making this criticism, the fundamentals...
You mean 2011?
Yeah, you know, he made this statement at the early part of 2012.
Okay.
And the budget statement that showed the state of the economy was presented in 2011. So that is the state of the economy at the time he was making the presentation. Okay. If he had mentioned 2012, anybody would have said, no, but why did you then criticize the then government? Because the fundamentals were even more superior than what it is you are boasting about today. So he had to take refuge in 2014, because 2014 selectively he could see that, okay, the fundamentals were a bit worse. So now, in order to now say that, you know what I'm saying is really consistent. I was challenging the bad fundamentals of 2014, and now the fundamentals are strong, so you cannot say that I'm being inconsistent. but he's being inconsistent. Because 2012, at the time you're speaking, the fundamentals were superior to what it is.
And 2012, he was speaking on the 4th of April at the Ferdinand Ayin.
Perfect. That even makes it better. That even makes it better.
Sorry, what I saw was
check the date well.
What I saw was May.
So let me bring it up again.
Yeah. Anyway,
it was 2nd May.
2nd May, exactly. That's what I said earlier.
Which he spoke. Yes, it was Wednesday, the 2nd of May.
Sure, that's what I said.
2012. Sorry, Wednesday, the 2nd of May.
Very good.
Okay,
and that's what I said. Now, so the point then I'm making is that
I need you to find a way of wrapping up your first presentation.
I've not even dealt on the many issues.
Okay, so what it is that sometimes
it is not a new press conference.
Sometimes
I needed to explain what it is that we sought to do. Yeah.
Okay. So what it is that you've been speaking for almost 15 minutes now, but because you may not know, you wouldn't know that is what is going on. So quickly, just wrap up the first presentation you were making, and I was asking for highlights of your presentation.
Yes, so
I'll do that. Seek to point out
I'll do that.
Some of the
I'll try and just go quickly, and then maybe have an opportunity to come back if there are any.
Right.
Good. Now, so that's the first. That's the first one, which had to do with what you call not being true to the facts. The second one, which again we established, was that when he started producing his numbers, you do an independent verification of the numbers he started producing. For example, he quoted what the budget deficit was at the end of 2012, what it was at the end of 2013, 14, all the way to 2016. You can see deliberately again, the vice president does what it is he does typically, twisting and distorting of the facts. So for example, he says at the end of 2016, the budget deficit was 9.3. When the data at the Ministry of Finance has established that even if you are looking at the old series, it's actually 7.8. And if you are looking at the new series, it's 6.1. And it cannot be the case that the vice president, with the head of the economic management, is not aware. But he needed to, as it were, put data out there to create the impression that the NDC's position is worse than it ought to be, while at the same time skewing his to make it look even better. I'm saying that minimum credibility is required, and for that position he should not do that.
But when you repeat that he's skewing, I think we all have come to understand that he chose periods.
No, for this one, it's not period choice.
When it comes to the questioning of the cedi depreciation, for example, if, like you pointed out, if he had gone to 2009, 2010, 2011, he would not have been able to make the statement that he made that's the best.
No, but that one actually there's a complete lie in saying that they did it in 2014. It's a complete and deliberate lie. He chose 2014 for a reason, because if he had mentioned 2012, the inconsistency would have been glaring. So he ran away from 2012 to create the impression to the country that was speaking in 2014, where somehow...
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the depreciation.
Yeah, I agree.
And the rate of depreciation.
I agree on that.
Not the statement.
I agree on that. Now, so that's about the number.
Yeah, so give me a minute more.
But now let me... Now let me just talk about some of the reasons why we said what it is happening. And that would come to some of what Professor said earlier. Now, he said, for example, if you want to look at the fundamentals, you cannot really say, for a matter of fact, that some of the fundamentals today are not worse than what they were in the past. I disagree. Let me explain why. Listen, if you, for example, look at capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP, at the close of 2016, when we were leaving office, it was 4.5%. In the first year of the NPP, it came down to as low as 1.1%. In the second year, 2018, it's still below 2%. That's a massive deterioration. And capital expenditure is critical, because that means the extent of emphasis you are putting on what actually strengthens an economy, what becomes the bedrock that brings about future transformation, future growth, and generates jobs and the well-being of our people. That's a massive deterioration. Let me give you another example. For example, they met inflation at 15.4. Sometime in March of 2016, inflation actually had gone up to 19.2. Within a matter of maximum 9 months, we brought it from 19.2 down to 15.4. When they took over in 2017, for 12 long months, they brought it down from 15.4 down to 13.2, less than 2%. Talking about the deceleration in inflation, their performance was woeful.
Okay.
We took 9 months to bring the inflation down from 19.2 to 15.4.
Yes,
you actually take
a break at this point.
Less than 2%.
Take a break at this point.
There's so much more to say. I hope we'll have an opportunity.
Now, the same question to you, and as far as you are concerned, I want you now to marry the two groups. What are the highlights that, as citizens or as people who live in this country, I should be paying attention from what Dr. Bawumia presented and from what the NDC's finance team also presented? And in this regard, we are talking about comments they made and the figures they churn out about the health of the economy, not the policy issues that Dr. Bawumia mentioned. We shall go to that. And subsequently, we'll be asking Professor Peter Quote's question that he asked at the presentation that Bawumia made. His question was simple. How does all of the nice things said translate into jobs? He asked the question apparently was not answered.
Okay. I mean, first, clearly, I mean, both parties are concerned to show that they are better managers of the economy when it comes to so-called fundamentals. and I think that focus on the fundamentals itself is not a neutral issue. So, for example, the thing about inflation targeting. Inflation targeting has consequences for other aspects of economic management. I mean, I think there's a fair consensus now that inflation targeting basically has a deflationary effect on economic activity. Okay. And this is really because you cannot prioritize the interests of financial asset holders. So it's no surprise that both parties were keen to talk about what the IMF thinks, what Bloomberg thinks, and what various international entities think, because that's where the focus. And I think that's important because whilst inflation has to be managed, how it is managed has so the thing about capital expenditure, for example, that Fifi talked about. I mean, when you are doing an IMF program, one pillar of the stabilization thing puts pressure on public expenditure. So that public expenditure also works through, given the importance of the government in the economy, into demand management. So all the things about capital, all those things, there are consequences for the economy. And of course, there was the NDC that initiated the IMF program. And they are both in convergence about the importance of being in the good books of the IMF. So there's policy convergence there. So the debate really is about, who would have dealt better, in that situation. So that's one point, the so-called fund. And I just want to make a point which is relevant here. I mean, we talk about the fundamentals without reference to the structural context, because there's a structural reality which defines how the fundamentals play out. They are not determinant of what governments do, the type of money they borrow and how they spend it. But that structure is important because, for example, the fundamentals that he talked about in terms of the Kufuor inheritance, that was the consequence of the worst global financial and economic crisis of 2008 and 2009. Commodity prices collapsed. So if you are a commodity dependent country like Ghana, gold and cocoa prices collapsed. Kufuor's long period of so-called good fundamentals because it came at the peak of the commodity boom. Okay? And I think we need to take account of these things. And that also, it's important in some of the points that Boffin made about the structural constraints that our governments have to deal with. But you look at the argument between the two parties about debt. What struck me about Bawumia is that Bawumia used percentages in his discussion of public debt. The NDC used figures. Bawumia's percentages is based, he talks about the relative percentage. The debt has increased, but the percentage of GDP has dropped. Now, the economy has been rebased. If you rebase the economy, that proportion, relationship will drop. So, but what interests me about the NDC's thing about the debt was that it tried to discuss what I think are important questions about debt. It doesn't answer the question whether they were better in how they performed, but it poses the qualitative questions. that I think are important. First of all, I mean, I agree with Bawumia that, I mean, all governments borrow, okay? The size of what you borrow is important. The type of borrowing is important, whether it's domestic borrowing, whether it's foreign borrowing, you know, the rate you borrow at, you know, the length of the life of the loan and so on and so forth, you know, and how you hope to spend it, okay, and how you hope to pay for it, you know, it's important. Now, if you look at these questions, an important element has to do with the increasing foreign portion of our debt, even the domestic debt. About a third of it is held by foreigners. Now, Bawumia in his thing referred to investors exiting, and that having an effect on the cedi. Now, so that has consequences for the, you know, the challenges of your economy. So the quality of our debt, in that sense, is changing. If you look at the '98 Asian financial crisis, an important reason was that there's quite a bit of domestic debt held by foreigners. When they decided to exit, it precipitated a crisis, and it's happened to a number, you know, of countries. So the quality of the debt.
As Adongo mentioned that, how bad is that situation, and should it be a bad thing?
Well, what do you mean by bad? If you have a certain proportion of your debt in foreign exchange, and people have jitters, Argentina is having the same experience. It's happened to a number of countries. That is why when people talk about, say, domestic borrowing, by and large, they try to limit it to domestic currency. When you open it up to foreigners, and they decide that actually it's time to move from Ghanaian, you know, debt, public debt, to U.S. Treasury bills, they want to dump their money. They may even be ready to discount their investment, so long as they can lay their hands on foreign exchange and get out. So that will put pressure on, and it has all kinds of knock-on effects, you know. So it's not simply whether you are paying a high interest rate for the loan, but also the site of the borrowing and the kind of people who are taking the debt. So it's very important.
So it's a risk.
It's a big risk.
And among the two, you know, regimes or parties, who seems to be doing too much of that?
Well, the size of it has increased, but both of them. I don't know that the NDC had a cap, for example, on how much of the debt was going to be held by foreigners. But they are both agreed in terms of opening up, you know, to foreign investors in the local market. Then there's the thing for me also about which was not the collateralization. I think it's an important issue, but the instrument that became law under the NDC was drafted when Dufour was finance minister. Okay, we made some critical comments about it at that time. Now, the collateralization of your mineral resources has a number of consequences. The point the NDC makes about, say, closing fiscal space is important. But in a country where really accountability for public expenditure is so weak, we are not sure that borrowings are even properly spent. That compounds the situation. And then critically, there's the intergenerational dimension of it, that your non-renewable mineral resources, you should exploit them with some intergenerational, you know, sensitivity, so that how you spend what your returns on it. But when you collateralize it, of course, then you've forgone, you know, that possibility, particularly when there's no clear targeting of where that investment, you know, it's going to go.
was seeking to show that they are better, superior managers of the economy than the NDC has done. And that appears to be the bottom line of this whole discussion. Question is, was he dealing with fact or not? For example, he spoke about inflation. And his point was that inflation, they've managed to get it to drop from 15.4% in 2016 to 9% as of January 2019. 9.2? Okay, as of January 2019. And that is the lowest in 6 years. So he's saying that to show you that they are doing a better job.
Yeah.
Fact or not?
No, but you see, I mean, what is the significance of that fact? It's a question to ask. Because we cannot simply take that fact. Because if you have an IMF program, one of the things you will agree on would be to reduce your budget deficit, to reduce inflation. And that has consequences for public expenditure. The public expenditure squeeze has consequences for the whole economy. And people's income, you know, the kind of economic activity and so on. So if you are a better manager in terms of managing inflation, we should ask for what purpose and with what consequence? Because it's connected to the question of what is the effect on people. Because when the IMF came in, when the NDC went to the IMF, it was because of the size of the deficit and managing all. So they agreed a package. And it is arguable, although this is a counterfactual, it is arguable that any Ghanaian, either of the two regimes, given the similarity of their economic orientation and their agreement about having good relations with the IMF, would have made an effort to manage inflation with similar consequences. That's what I'm interested in.
So you're saying, yes, he's dealing with facts,
yes,
but the fact is a product of compulsion or condition.
No, I'm saying that.
And not a question of choice.
No, the focus on the
exercise of independent judgment. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the focus on the fact is a limit, it's an inadequate focus. Because that precisely plays into the terrain on which the two parties have chosen to carry out the argument. I'm saying that we as Ghanaian citizens should be interested in widening the ambit of that conversation. Not to simply say 9%, 12%, but to ask 9% meaning what? 12% meaning what? That's really, and what is the long-term effect of that 9 and 12?
Just a minute, and Professor Bokping has been nodding a lot in agreement with some of the things you say, but on this one, I saw him shaking his head. So in a minute, can you tell us what your problem is with his analysis?
Precisely, because he talked about a certain supervisory, the IMF.
Yep.
Both parties are guilty. Between July 2009 and July 2012, this period for which my good friend here has quoted copiously, we were under an IMF program. Ghana was under an IMF program from July 2009 to July 2012. Ghana has been under an IMF program from April 2015 and December 2018. Both parties.
So for the period of 2009,
even for the single-digit inflation he talked about,
which is sort of historic, you are saying
we're
that
still they
cannot claim the credit.
Single-digit continued all the way to the end of 2012.
Okay,
I'm coming.
So finish your 1 minute point. Yeah.
Yes, but let me tell you, the fundamentals largely were okay up to July 2012. In fact, after the president died, running to the 2012 elections, Ghana messed up big time. Look at the deficit we recorded in the last 4 months of 2012. Ghana never fully recovered from the election excesses of 2012. So that
the presidency alone overspent by how much of its budget?
Huge.
40% or so?
I'm telling you. So you see, let's take the politics out of it. You know what? This country has gone to the IMF 16 times. It cuts across the two major parties. The first person who went to the IMF for a fund-supported program was actually Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in 1965. Ghana's problems started under the supervision of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. We are talking about the Gordonsburg economy we inherited, that we have failed as a country within 62 years to change. Okay. Our actions and inactions, look, let me tell you, inflation was 0.98% in 1964. By the end of 1965, inflation has jumped to 24.6%.
Why?
You know why?
Why?
Largely because of slumping commodity prices, which happens virtually every 10 years. Nkrumah couldn't survive that.
So that's the structural issue we have to agree on. The structural
issues we have, that's what I'm saying, that forget about NDC, forget about NPP. You can trace this thing back to the pre-colonial days, the Gordonsburg economy we inherited. We are hugely dependent on commodity prices. Look, we are talking about fundamentals have improved today. The resilience is very, very weak. The slightest shocks, either internal or
that.
external.
The resilience is weak. What is that?
What I'm saying is that we have made progress, but it's not.
No, that is a problematic phrase. The resilience is weak.
So let me maybe
it's fragile.
It's fragile. Maybe you went to a good school.
Okay, so let me have.
Well, he prefers that, so we'll give it to him.
So you are resilient and weak at the same time. So let me have Dr. Graham, finish up in 2 minutes, and then I'll go to Kwekubako. He's been opening, the documents.
He's fact-checking all that we are saying.
All of them. Okay, he's got a bonded copy of Dr. Bawumia's presentation already. Yes.
The other thing about Bawumia's thing that struck me was the incredible populism of his presentation about the port.
Populism?
Yeah.
About the ports?
Yeah. It was a very populist thing. And you see, let me explain what I'm saying. He made this kind of almost like a magician bringing a rabbit out of a hat announcement that, so from today, benchmark values are going to go down by 50%. And the Aboso Okai people in the audience, they cheered. That's the kind of highlight of the moment. But if you look at that, we can come to deconstruct the economics of it. But there are a number of things problematic about it. When I heard it, it's, first of all, that whole thing about the port reform is part of the whole trade facilitation reform thing, which has been going on for some years, since Ghana signed the WTO trade facilitation thing, about making port, transactions cheap. But two things. I mean, I went to look at the Customs Act. It led me back to the WTO agreement on customs valuation. You see, there are 6 ways of valuing goods. The benchmarking, which is the kind of what was it? There's a term in it. It's actually the very last one, because the law provides a primary way of valuing things. So it's not even clear what the scope of Bawumia's announcement is. In that,
what is clear is its impact, because
but that's a populism. But that's a populism I'm talking about.
After the announcement, people began to enjoy it.
I'm coming to that. That's the populism of it. 2, if we have a law which specifies a hierarchy of choices for customs determination, what is the status of the Vice President's pronouncements in relation to the clear provisions of a law which is a domestic legislation of international treaty obligations? But let me finish. The
question has been raised about that.
Yeah, let me extend because there's a pattern of impunity. You see, a pattern of impunity which has also extended to the management of the extractive sector. There's a report about the ExxonMobil agreement and the fact that clear legal provisions in respect of taxes were disrespected. It is not the first time. The president has been talking a lot about the wonderful Anglo Gold Ashanti agreement. I feel embarrassed for him because clearly he hasn't read it. Because that agreement is worse than what we had before. Okay? And it also is full of illegality. That same illegality was manifest in the Goldfields agreement that the NDC signed. So there's a pattern in which once people are
speaking about
in power, they feel they can
do
do
language
anything.
similar to what you're saying. So we'll return to that. But Kweku, yes, what were the highlights for you as far as the health of the economy is concerned with the presentation by Dr. Bawumia and, of course, by the NDC finance team?
Yeah, but a quick one. And this is based on something my brother Fifi said. It is not true that the NDC administration under President Mills did not find fault with the economic performance of the Kufuor administration.
No, I didn't say that before. I didn't say that.
What did you say?
What I said is that we acknowledge some of the good things that were done. But of course, in the adversarial spirit, we also took short at some of the things they did. I never said we did not find fault in them.
Well,
I said we acknowledge that positive growth rate has been sustained. CD depreciation had done well for at least lifespan.
Because
we took short
the NDC is on record to have challenged even the fact that Kufuor's administration had tripled or quadrupled the economic size of the economy. And indeed, my good friend Fifi was the lead spokesperson on that matter, about it, the whole growth having been cocaine-induced.
I'm missing two things.
419 statistics. It's a fact. Indeed, Hannah Tete officially declared that the Ghanaian economy was broke, had collapsed, before they went to the IMF. This is documented. So indeed, they did so. It's a fact. Highlights. My brother Zhao, very interesting. I am not too good when it comes to those things. But you see, the port reforms is one of the highlights I saw. And it's not just the question of the benchmark matter, which really I have little knowledge about. And I've listened to the AGI as well as Guta, and I find it quite interesting.
I was actually hoping that we could keep that aside from
but you were asking
the
for
analysis,
the highlights.
but he's brought it in. So yeah,
okay.
the question was highlights specific to the health of the economy without reference to the pronouncement. But let's go on, because Dr. Agri mentioned a bit of it. And
the port reforms, it went beyond the issue of the benchmark valuation that the Vice President talked about. There was also things like the physical examination that we go through.
Right.
And they need to reduce it from the 90% to about 10%. We're talking here of the competitiveness of our ports relative to our...
Togo.
Yes. And I thought those things are of critical importance.
I think there's actually a response from Fitch, right? Suggesting that as far as the ports are concerned, I think we are, is it fourth best or something by way of the rates that have come in. I'll look that up. Go on.
Yes. Yeah. So
this is something I would like to return to also.
Okay.
Sure.
More elaborately.
And for me, I mean, as a lay person, somebody who doesn't have the requisite competence to deal with these issues, I've been observing, I've been listening, and in the last 2 days, relative to the benchmark thing, it appears some progress have been made. Some operationalization of the measure has taken place, and the beneficiaries are out there saying they are gaining something. It's a relief. The AGI's position gave me the impression, so in business, in terms of the economy, there are various sectors.
Yes.
Different policies impact differently on those sectors. You'll be surprised, there will be people in the business sector who are not very comfortable with this particular measure. But there are sectors who will benefit. It's for the policymakers to decide which direction is this policy going, what is the ultimate benefit within the short term, medium term, or long term. That decision belongs to the policy makers. You take it, it goes well in terms of implementation, you win. It goes bad, you fall on your sword. That's how I see it. And it's clear that the constituency out there in the business community are happy with this particular thing. And if I take a critical look at the ports reforms, the fiscal examination, the digitization and all those things, I think in the long term, they would help our economy. We're not talking here of structural transformation. After all, we've all seen that this is the economy both parties are dealing with. That's their philosophy, as Yao himself painted. But within context of the economy we are dealing with, these reforms, these initiatives, I think lead to an improvement in context. That's the point I'm making. Now also, the issue of the IMF, and you said we are going specific, so I'm now a bit worried as to what...
No, proceed.
See,
proceed.
There was this whole noise about a certain intervention, and I think Atu Folsom raised it, about an intervention of some $700 million to shore up the city. And they've quoted some Bank of Ghana documentation. My own research shows that no, it's not accurate. Indeed, the document I've seen, which is also a Bank of Ghana document, indicates that only about 100 million of the so-called 700 million went into intervention. the 600 million went into coupons payments to do with our domestic bonds and those things. And also energy-related payments. The Marys, the car power, and the rest. So in actual fact, strictly speaking, there hasn't been a 700 or 800 million intervention, forex intervention by the Bank of Ghana as alleged by the NDC. Officially, that's not what the records say, and this is documented. And it vindicates what the Vice President was saying. He didn't lie. He told the truth. This is a two forcings thing. He takes on the Vice President, and this, the quote is this, in paragraph 6 of the Vice President's presentation. He says the Vice President mentioned that the fiscal deficit for 2016 was 9.3% of GDP. This cannot be true, and we treat the Vice President to revise his propagandist data. Quote, the economy ended in 2012 with a fiscal deficit of 12.2% of GDP, 11.7 in 2013, 11.9 in 2014, before falling to 6.7% in 2015, but rose again to 9.3 in 2016. Quote, end of quote. Mr. Forson's view is that official data from the Ministry of Finance indicates clearly that overall deficit by end of year 2016 was 7.8 of GDP. That is 6.1 of new GDP. He's wrong. The 2012 fiscal deficit and things, you can see all that in the budget of 2017, mid-year 2017, as well as 2018 and 2019. These are official figures, cannot be challenged. Mr. Tufosin went and took a figure, a provisional outing from the Ministry of Finance website. It's a provisional outing that he went taking to project his course. But the truth of the matter is that these figures that the Vice President gave are absolute. Official. And that's what is there. So if it comes to the crisis or controversy over figures, as far as I'm concerned, the Vice President's figures have more credibility. Where he had to use rebased figures, he did. Where he didn't have to use, he put both sides together. If you check when he was talking about fiscal deficit on cash basis, he used 6.8 of rebased GDP in 2016. Yeah. Okay? To the 3.8 rebased in 2018. That's intellectually an honest appreciation of the issue. That's what it is. So really, when it comes to that aspect too, I really don't get the point our friends are making. But see, the point about 2012, and Prof came in with the point that I had put down. See, 2009 to 2011, we are told of the unprecedented achievements in terms of macroeconomic, and we are told that's unprecedented in Ghanaian history. I'm not sure, because the same Dr. Bawumia indicated earlier in the lecture Fifi refers to, between 1959 to 63.
2012 one?
Yes.
Okay.
Between 1959 to 63, 4-year period, we had a single digit. It's true.
I'm talking about 33 months of single digits. Unprecedented. That's what I was talking about.
Oh.
33 months long of single digits. Unprecedented.
4 years is how many months?
You're talking about what?
4 years is how many months?
4 continuous years. That's
yes.
What you're talking about.
And then Nkrumah.
Okay.
That's 4 years.
That's true.
But
it's true.
That's ancient history, though.
We're
talking about.
You said unprecedented in Ghanaian history. No, please. You said
economy
unprecedented in Ghanaian history. You didn't say in the Fourth Republic.
Yeah, but really,
you didn't draw that extension.
Who worries about 59 at this moment?
So a few moments ago, we were talking of the structural problem, which has persisted post-independence. Began before independence and has persisted. then we shouldn't talk about that. But the point I am making is that 2012, Bawumia was making his thing 2012, May. Prof says from July, things started deteriorating. In fact, the undercurrents were already there.
No, he's talking about July 2012.
Yes.
That's what he said.
Yes, and I'm saying that before July 2012, the undercurrents of the deterioration were visible.
I agree. I agree.
Were visible.
Don't worry, I'll come to that.
And it is true, Bawumia made that statement about fundamentals and things 2012. That's true. I have the speech here. But at that point in time, the trend had begun. The question to ask is why was it not sustainable? The unprecedented achievements. President Mahama provides a good example. The answer. And I would want to read. This is from Senchi. Okay? See, before they went to the IMF, this is 2012.
2014.
2014. Policy credibility. For the policy credibility. The Senchi Forum, just two. This I'm quoting from the document, the executive summary. For 2 years, 2 consecutive years, 2012 and 2013, macroeconomic targets have been missed. This is their own book. Annual budgets have not been implemented as approved by Parliament. Mid-year reviews have sometimes been used to introduce new policies rather than for an assessment of policies outlined in the budget. Budget outcomes have deviated significantly from forecast and therefore have tended to be perceived as not dependable. This is 2012-2013. President Mahama puts it very interesting. He says this way. He says, every government, he was talking to Senchi, every government, for example, has succeeded to various degrees in attaining macroeconomic stability. But as of now, none has been successful in finding a way to sustain it.
And I agree.
Indeed, almost every government leaves office with a less than desirable macroeconomic situation. And the government that will succeed it then spends the next 1 to 2 years bringing the economy back from the brink. It is a vicious cycle that we must break. They brought it be. That's not me. It is clear that we know how to attain this, but now we must learn how to sustain it. What has Bawumia and his people been doing the last 2 years? Exactly this one. Exactly this. When they took over, the Ghanaian economy was in distress in spite of all the unprecedented achievements that have been chalked between 2009 and 2016. They've had to use 2 years almost to arrest the decline, to stabilize the situation, and to lay a foundation for moving forward. That's what they have had to do. You see, I found one thing very peculiar about President Mahama's era in our history. First of all, don't forget, he became president July 2012. He was serving the unexpired period of the Mills administration. 2013 was when he became substantive president. He didn't have this 2 years thing in his favor then. He took over from his own people. If there was a mess, they had created the mess themselves.
But he was head of the economic management team.
So, but that's the point. You see, 2009, this is philosophy. It's applicable when they took over from Kufuor's time. 2012, when he became president, he was actually part of the same system that was in place. And we are even being told, because he was head of the economic management team, then he's actually immediately responsible for all the mess that had been created. 2013, he became president. He was using 2 years, if you want to apply this principle to his thing, then he was using 2 years, 2012, 2013, to correct the mess that they themselves had created. That's the peculiarity I'm talking about relative to him. And Bawumia is right. If he comes to, and look, ideologically, I'm very different when it comes to some of these so-called statistics. Do you understand? IMF or all those things. I have a problem with it. But here we are. That's the market economy we are dealing with. So I'm a realist. I'm dealing with it within that context.
Okay.
In that context, if you took item by item, then Bawumia is right to say they've done better. Because you are talking of the 2 years, 3 months of the Akufo-Addo administration. We are talking of the 2 years, 3 months of the Mahama administration. You do the comparative analysis. There is no doubt that the Akufo-Addo administration has done far better than the Mahama administration. It's as simple as that. The figures and the records support it.
Okay. On that note, we'll take a break. When we return, we'll continue and finish up with the question of the economy and then tie in with the energy matter, because that also has something to do with the economy. And the issue I was referring to about Fitch and its recent thing to say about Ghana is the story published on the 5th of April 2019, which says Ghana has lowest import duty on vehicles in sub-Saharan Africa. We'll be right back.